a scion of many worlds. He descends from above. Greenstone had run so smoothly he had a bit of time to enjoy the flight over to the Goldlands. With all the rumors swirling around him, this meeting will no doubt go very differently from the last one. Coupled with the metals he had imported in, the technology he gave them, the portal network he kicked off to help their trade routes. The audible gasp as he's recognized makes him smirk under his fur. What grabs his attention hard, though, is the fact that there's a fair amount of erumenta with different forms of glasses. Looks like Isabella Slipway has capitalized on the books about making glasses he gave her. He suspected that she wouldn't stop at making them for her family, but to see it so widespread is heartening. The woman has either released the knowledge to help others, or is making out like a bandit. Either way, good for her. They don't part for him, though, and he slows his descent to the ground, ending up using Axiom to tell physics to sit in the corner as he hovers in midair a few meters above the crowd. Someone jumps up and their fingers graze against the tips of his footclaw. "Could you please not?" he asks before floating up a bit. "I'd rather like to land. Could you please give me the room to do so?" "What happened to you?" a familiar voice asks, and he smiles again. Isabella has just emerged from a store that has a sign in the local pidgin exclusively, but he can guess what it is. "A great deal, Miss Slipway. I see you've been doing well in the eyeglasses business," Emmanuel says, as the woman just looks up at him. "What happened that made you double in size and your fur go shiny? Where did you get the extra wing bits or antenna? How does that even happen?" Isabella asks in shock as she looks up at him. A very odd set of circumstances, but needless to say, I've made the best of it. "Are you still working for the Council of the Goldlands, or have you moved on to other business?" "Moved on, I'm not sorry to say. A lot of women need this kind of help," Isabella explains. "Ah, unfortunately I'm on the clock. So while it's good to see you're doing well, I need to speak to the council," he says, rising up again. "Unfortunately, you favor fairly uniform architecture around here, so it's hard to tell which building is which from above." "It's not that bad," Isabella says. "I'm just saying from above. It's easier to navigate this place when I can see under the rooftops, to which I could get a better view if I was allowed to land people." He calls down to the crowds below, who finally part and allow him to touch down. "Thank you. My goodness. You do stand out somewhat." "Yes, but that's no call to be rude. I haven't had multiple zins of metal traded here for food to be gawked at." "Did you really kill death itself? And that's why the long-promised rescue is here?" Someone asks him, and like a dam breaking, an absolute tidal wave of questions flows over him. Ladies, please. I understand you're curious, but as I said, I'm here on business. I was merely getting my bearings before heading to the council building," he says. "I got distracted and I apologize, but I must get back to business." Now that he knows that the building is in fact down the street with the proper building at the end of a T section, or rather one to the left, just a touch, he recognizes it. "Excuse me." He then flaps his wings and launches upwards and begins flying towards the proper building in question. Like a tide, the peoples of the Goldlands are following him as he goes, and as the crowd starts to rush towards him from ahead and he can only barely resist rolling his eyes. There's a pulling at the Axiom and he lands on the road without bothering with the space in between. The building is easily identified on the face for the grand double doors. While it shares the same uniform roofs and squat architecture of the Goldlands, it has a large pair of double doors, which are rarely used. He entered this building via a side door last time. This time, he's a bit on the hefty side for that, so he gives the massive doors a gentle tapping with his knuckle. The reverberating booms make it sound like he's using a battering ram. It takes a minute. Then another familiar face shows up and outright pales. Not that an heir Aramenta isn't pale to begin with, but the woman clearly sees his increased size and remembers just how rude and unreasonable she was to him last time. Would you mind getting the brace off the door? I don't want to teleport in, and breaking down the door is even ruder. He asks, and she stares for a moment, clearly off balance. They're true. The rumors were true. Depends on the rumor, actually, he says before giving the large doors another tap. But seriously, can you open this? He asks, and she just stares. Please? That seems to get her moving, and she rushes into the building again. The crowd is getting to the point of density that just one or two bad moves could set it off into a riot, which he really doesn't want. He hears the door unlatch, and he then gently pushes on it. Hold it! Why do you want to speak with the elders of the Goldlands? Geyer asks, and he smirks. Lady Isarisen and I are unifying Lakron, all nations and peoples. I am here to negotiate with the elders for how to get the Goldlands to be part of this. Are you going to attack us if we don't? No. He answers, and the crowd lets out a sigh of relief. But I also doubt you'll refuse my offer. The sudden intake of breath from the crowd is almost comical, if it wasn't portraying him as the bad guy. Oh, calm down, will you? I'm here to offer a very good deal, not threaten people into compliance. He says as he gives the crowd around him an unhappy look. You are a threat. You broke the Slaver Empire and killed a goddess just to put the free cities into your debt, Geyer shouts at him, and he tilts his head in interest. Oh, so you're so frightened of me then? Interesting, he notes. I'm only a threat to those who threaten me and mine. He kneels down to be closer, and his antennae hang low. You look nervous. Enough. Don't come in, the door can fit you, but you'll be scraping your way around even on your hands and knees. A new voice calls out as an Earth Aromanta walks out with a pair or Water Aromenta twins behind her and a Lyrac with a large book, a familiar book that Isabella once held. What do you want? The Earth Aromenta asks. As I said, I'm unifying Lakron alongside the immortal Empress. She and I will be its protectors. For this to be proper, there must be a formal oath of alliance from each of the peoples of Lakron. Now, protection, protected trade, and representation to the wider galaxy are some of the basics. But is there more needed? He asks, and there's a pause. I should have brought you into the building and not discussed this in front of a crowd. Probably. The fun thing about calling someone else out or trying to put them on the spot is that it can backfire very easily, and I'm very good at doing that, Emmanuel says. Very well. How will this change our lives? The elder asks, very aware that with the way the rumor mill runs, she might as well have the whole of the Goldlands as a witness. Very little. The Oath of Alliance will have laws attached, but those laws are already part of your legal system anyways. So things such as murder, theft, torture, and other such wicked acts are reconfirmed as illegal and vile and not to be done. He says, and there are some talks all around him. And the whole world is swearing this, even old enemies? Yes. And if we're being cheated again? If Miru or Greenstone or some other country tries to cheat us of our rightfully grown foods and produce? You can take it to me. I'll be able to settle things even if they want to ignore you. Especially in Miru, isn't it? Considering I've adopted their queen, yes. Did you give the crown back? The elder asks. Considering that the young woman has learned, understood, and nearly refused to take it back, I'd say she's ready. But the crown. I have to look to all of Lakron now, not just one country, he says, and she stares at him. What really happened at the Slaver Empire? What did you do that caused the Orthani tribes to rip themselves out of their own flesh and take on traits like... She gestures to all of him. That, but not as much. It began with a deal between myself and the city-states. I wanted them to calm themselves for a time and basically for them to owe me a favor. I wanted to make sure that when rescue finally arrived, it wasn't to a war. And the deal? I'd get my favor, but only if I could do a favor for them first. They were being attacked by a brutal ship called the Broken Soul. I managed to pick up the trail with some help, including one of the victims, a Fosa woman. Her old name is lost, but she now goes by Banshee. I started to learn then in the exact way Banshee was injured and what I needed to do to heal her, that this wasn't just a series of pirate ships using the same name as I first assumed. What was it? In the end, the ultimate ruler of the Slaver Empire, the founder of those monsters, a second survivor from the crash of the nest. I called her the Shadow. I never bothered to learn her name, and I do not want to. A monster like that deserves to be forgotten. What? That rumor was true? Yes, and she couldn't even see other people as actual people anymore. Stealing bodies, violating souls, and using a type of power I was only scraping at the surface of to do horrifying things. The Forgotten were her work. And I figured out how to heal the Forgotten. This gave me all the knowledge I needed to counter her strange powers, to resist the soul-stealing bitch. I then gathered an army and moved, penning in her little nightmare with my strongest warriors and stealing out all her victims, leaving only her and her people to starve behind city walls as I laid a trap below. I would only let them live if they surrendered. They didn't surrender. They didn't get a chance. The Shadow, that monster, deliberately set the trap off when she was made aware of it and ripped out the souls of her own people to use as weapon and armor. She then came for my army. So I trapped her with me in the ruins of the city and fought. You beat her alone. No, not alone. You see, by that point, rescue was so close that warriors could show up in advance. My brother Horace, my mother Morgana. Both of them arrived as swiftly as they could and added their strength to mine. As the battle progressed, more and more warriors leapt ahead of the rescue fleet and began harassing and attacking the Shadow from afar as I kept it trapped. Then she grew desperate and used many of her stolen souls to try and hurl me beyond even death. Unfortunately for her, she succeeded, and I went beyond death itself and found ascension, which showed me the path back. Strong enough that killing her was simple, he says. I became a primal, which has an effect on a species. Without the primal Nagasha, there would not be so many kind of Nagasha. Now that I am a primal Earthani, there are many kinds of Earthani. So that's how all that happened? All but the size. That's from being part of Titan Squad, which can be taught. Emmanuel replies. So you're immortal? The shining fur and my claws are almost completely indestructible. It's almost impossible to hurt me now. He says, and if we live under your laws and let you lead, you'll protect us? Protect, teach, help, and heal, he says, and the elder considers. And what do you all think? The elder calls out to the crowd. Do we join with this? The crowd goes through debate and chaos, and Emmanuel smiles under his fur. Very smart, she can't make a snap decision, and asking for time will cause the crowd to grow upset. But with how many different opinions there are, she can literally say anything and claim she heard someone calling it to her. The debates happen for a time until the elder holds up her hands. I've heard enough. The Goldlands will not be left behind. If more is coming to us, if more change is on the horizon, then we will face it. We're in.